Welcome back to the panel discussion, Cybersecurity Threat Intelligence, sponsored by RSA on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. My guests today are Ron Karbach, Defense Intelligence Officer for Cyber, Defense Intelligence Agency, Tim Ruland, Chief Information Security Officer, U.S. Census Bureau, Shaun Khalfan, Chief Information Security Officer, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and Zulfikar Ramzan, Chief Technology Officer at RSA. I am your moderator, John Gilroy. Last week I was at a conference and a guy named Dr. Mark Busby was talking about managing data centers. And this guy's got a PhD in engineering. He's a big, smart guy. And so he talked about using artificial intelligence to manage a data center, and that's pretty good. So I went up to him afterwards. I said, how about real intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, you know? This is the challenge, you know? Automation could be wrong. So Shaun, artificial intelligence, does this have a role in cybersecurity?
I think it absolutely does. I mean, I think as you look at just the evolution of this landscape, you're going to have to find methods and ways to accelerate that decision-making process, and whether it's helping to package and helping to enable a human to make the right decisions and to parse it accordingly, I think we're ultimately going to move in that direction.
Yeah, I was going to say, artificial intelligence, it's an area we've obviously heard a lot about recently. It's an area where I've happened to have had a lot of time to work and think about over the last decade and a half. And one is it's not that new in the context of even cybersecurity. It's gotten more buzz recently, but the idea has been around for a long time. But to me, the key with artificial intelligence, it's not just about whether your neural network is bigger than my neural network. It comes down to, number one, having the right data sources. Then number two, being able to know what it is about those data sources you should be looking at. And only if you've answered those first two questions and dealt with them appropriately does the algorithm itself matter. I think today we see a lot of companies out there talking about AI and machine learning, and they get so focused on the hype, the algorithm, they forget about the data source. AI is garbage in, garbage out. If you're not talking about the data up front, it doesn't matter how fancy your algorithm is, you're not going to be able to glean meaningful insights out of it.
Tim sure seems to agree.
When I was young, in the military, I was involved in artificial intelligence research. From an intelligence perspective, so I know it's been around for a long time. I think it does. I think, as Zulfikar said, it is the rules. It's how you define the rules is whether or not artificial intelligence is going to be beneficial to you. And I think one of the issues is not only the data source, but can the algorithm, can the artificial intelligent engine be programmed so that it can learn as fast as the adversaries are learning? They have all the time in the world to do what they want to do. Even with artificial intelligence, as we were talking about earlier, if you have a 0-day or 0-minute attack, how is that artificial intelligence programmed and learning to keep up with that threat? Because it's going to learn faster than a human, but there's still that time piece. So I think it's got a lot of potential, but I think it's got a long way to go.
And John, yeah. I was going to say, John, I value the proposition and the promise of artificial intelligence, but I'd like just to see some basic cybersecurity hygiene. The simple things that we need to do first. I mean, in a corollary, doing it at the same time as we build to the future. But there are simple things companies can do today. Everything from patching their networks properly, getting the patches in place that would really help us move forward and protect and defend our networks, as opposed to just hoping that some solution will come in the future.
Shaun, everyone throws out the word best practice. I like the phrase better practice. There's all kinds of good things to do and bad things to do. But one way to start off is by looking at your assets, And are there ways to automate looking at that? Or is this, you think for our listeners, think that's an important first step, or is it the last step? Where does this fit in your priorities?
I believe it's absolutely the first step, and as Ron mentioned, the basic cyber hygiene practices. That's one of them. Software and asset inventory within your enterprise. How do you defend what you don't know? And so you really have to enumerate your network, and there are solutions in place that to discover, identify. You could start to prioritize and flag what are your critical assets, and then from there you need to identify who's accessing those assets, how are they being handled and managed. But that's one of the basic cyber hygiene blocks. What data do you have on your net? What systems, what data, what assets do you have on your network?
So in the commercial world, same problems or different problems as far as this asset allocation and asset recognition?
In the commercial world, 100% the same problem. I don't think everyone's fully recognized it yet, but I think one thing we see a lot of our customers deal with, both in the private sector as well as the public sector, is what I like to call the gap of grief, which is that difference between security detail at the lowest level versus the higher level objective of the business or the mission. You know, it's very easy for a security practitioner to get caught up in terms like buffer overflow vulnerabilities or SQL injection across that scripting. But if you walk into a board meeting and use those terms, or if you walk into your CEO and use those terms, the meeting's going to be over in about 30 seconds. The reality is you have to be able to put business context around those low-level technical details. You've got to be able to put mission context around those low-level technical details. And we can only do that if we understand the impact. So for example, to Shaun's point, if I know, for example, that, hey, this asset that was targeted happened to contain some sensitive data, or it has a compliance implication, or it's a production system that could have a massive continuity impact, that's the context you have to be able to tie around to that threat. So when you do represent this at a higher level, you're not talking about whether the attack did X, Y, or Z, you're talking about the actual impact of that attack. And so to address that gap of grief, you need to have that ability to do categorization, to understand your assets, to tie that back in to the underlying threat, and then to provide a much more meaningful story up the chain.
You know, Tim, what is giving a lot of agency leaders grief is hiring people. How do you find the talent? Commercial companies can't find talent. Commercial companies have people in the streets with nets and trying to trap people and drag people in with cybersecurity skills and can't find them. How do you handle that situation in your agency to attract good cybersecurity talent?
I really don't have an answer.
Oh boy, it's hard.
I can tell you what we're doing, whether that's the best approach. We are looking at, we use, and we have gone to the Cyber Core program that DHS runs, the Scholarship for Service. You can find some really, really good people from that program. We've done that. When you hire them, you realize that they're going to stay for a couple years and then they're going to be moving on to industry where they can make a lot of money. But if you use the program right, you can bring in new people as they leave. We also really rely on the direct hire authority that OPM has given us for cybersecurity specialists. It helps because it allows you to really sort through the applicants a little easier. But there is no one way that I would say we're going to ever get past that hurdle in the current model, because we simply can't match the salary of the private sector. I think personally our challenges are a lot more interesting, but unfortunately trying to get people and keep them where they don't see that large payoff at the end is difficult.
So John, it's interesting. I think Michael Brown, the CEO for Symantec, said that they see a gap globally of about 6 million cybersecurity personnel by 2019. And I think when you look kind of in the U.S. projected shortfall of about 1.5 million. So how do we deal with that? So I think the talent is out there, but there is a volume gap issue, right? And so how do we sort that kind of from a DoD or a federal sector perspective? Well, for us, it may not be the salary or the equity in the firm. It's more about the mission draw. So it's what are we trying to do? Trying to protect the U.S. nation, trying to protect our defense. How do we compete with that salary? Mission focus, and then the kind of training and education that we can provide kind of on the job over time. I do think, you brought up the concept of people, and they are basically our national treasures. Our most valued asset is the people. You know, we've talked about automation, all these kind of different areas, but it's the people that make it work. From our perspective, we need kind of this broad range for cybersecurity threat intelligence. We worked with the Intelligence and National Security Alliance to come up with kind of a cyber threat intelligence framework for what the training would be for the folks, and it's going to take time to work through that gap. I do see a lot more commercial vendors providing courses, and that's all excellent, but we need to keep up with these centers of excellence and the other areas that we're working with through academia. So it's a combination of a mission draw, and then how do you prepare that upcoming workforce that is coming out.
We've taken the same approach within DHS, and some of the other benefits. We did have one of our first big hiring fairs where we were able to bring in the security clearance folks, bring in the HR folks, and make offers on the spot. That was a big win for us. But a lot of it is, as Ron mentioned, the mission, whether it's preventing drug trafficking, human trafficking, securing our borders. That's been a big draw, and also really working with some of the schools around here to get folks in. They get an opportunity to really play a critical role within a security operations center and really get some experiences at a younger age that they might not get going straight into industry. And I think we'll have to build out some sort of cybersecurity human resources life cycle model where as we see the attrition as they move up the chain and continue to grow, and we expect people to move out and go to industry and go to academia, and we hope to retain some and continue to grow that new crop of folks. But we've also been successful bringing in folks from Silicon Valley to come, even if it's just for a few years, bring some of that expertise in, help optimize operations in certain areas, and we have that flow of people and personnel.
I think we're seeing more people maybe drip out to Silicon Valley
Yeah,
than come
sure,
back.
absolutely.
But there is a promise, and Duty Cyber Strategy actually folds in this whole industry engagement piece to try to encourage that over time, and that's in the process of being implemented.
Zulfikar, when I was listening to Shaun, I wrote down baseball. Now, baseball teams just don't get someone off the street and put them in the World Series. They have farm clubs, and they test, and then some people fall off. And then they have a next level farm club, and then they bring them in the majors for a few weeks, send them back down, up, back down, and then they put them, and then only then, after a long seasoning period, do they put them in the big time. And everyone at this table is operating in the big time. I mean, federal agents are being attacked every day. So is that one approach? I mean, what insight do you have for these people? Try to hire people, just small type positions and wean them, grow your own?
Right, I think the key is it's not about trying to attract the right talent, because that's going to be a zero-sum game because you're all going after the same people.
Yeah.
It's about being able to cultivate talent so that you expand that pool
Farm
and you can
league.
hire. And so I think there's a farm league notion there. And we see this all the time. In fact, we've been with customers repeatedly where they'll come in on day one, they'll start using our NetWitness product, they can do some basic things with it. We train them for a couple of days, we show back up there about 3 months later, train them again for a couple of more days, show back up about 3 months later, do the same thing. Within 6 to 9 months, these guys all of a sudden become the more advanced analysts in their SOC. And the beauty of this is they didn't start off that way. They were hired maybe out of college. Maybe their background wasn't even in security. They happened to have just an interesting background. They were analytical, they were curious. So I fundamentally believe if you find people out there who are curious, who have that intellectual capacity, you can quickly train them to become very valuable members of your security community. And it's a much better way to go. Now look, some of them are going to leave for higher paying jobs or do something different. Others, I think, are going to be driven by that higher level purpose. And I believe that, by the way, in cybersecurity, most of us are in this field driven by that higher level purpose. We believe in trying to make the world safer. And I think that's the fundamental motivation. Otherwise, you'd be in investment banking or some other field that makes a lot more money. But ultimately, I think if you are in cyber, you can justify that by saying we're making the world better. And I think if we attract people that way, we can provide them with an opportunity to really do something useful in this world. I think that's the way we have to approach it.
I think it is public relations. I know that I have a lot of interns at the Census Bureau that come and talk to me. They're not in security. They're young. They're statisticians, or they're computer specialists doing something else. But I try and reach out to them, because if I can get them at their early stage of their career and get them interested, then I can bring them in and I can begin to train them. And we don't have a defense mission. We don't have that type of mission. I think it's a critical mission to the federal government, but security is the enabler for that mission. And so it's not quite the same as war fighters or supporting the war fighters. It's just as important, but it's a little bit harder sell at times.
I think, John, just as a quick follow-up, it's a national imperative to improve our STEM education from university level down to high schools to middle schools. Having robotics clubs with young kids that learn about how to use those things, manipulate it, understand the intent, we'll all grow it. But I agree with Zulfikar. You've got to cultivate that talent from within. And it's not just the STEM education. We do need lawyers, we need policy folks, we need an analyst. We actually like the term STEAM, including analysis in there, in addition to STEM.
Shaun, I think you have a master's degree and a CISSP, so you have formal and maybe certificate-based education. Are those qualities you look for, or is it more of a determination in people. I mean, you got to have both, don't you? I mean, it's a tough balance.
Sure, I think it's a mixed bag, and I think you can't just snap chalk and make decisions based on that. Absolutely. Where I think when we're looking at folks in our security operations center, whether it's cyber threat intelligence, whether they're our network hunters, whatever they may be, we've seen just varied backgrounds. Some folks have coming straight out of school from, whether it's from mathematical background, someone from I think we might have an English major in there and really turned to security, but had that security knack, and we've grown them to become a network, a cyber professional. So really, those are indicators and markers. And on the other side, we have on the policy and risk management and engagement side, I think that's where we're starting to see the growth of understanding the business of cyber. As Zulfikar mentioned earlier, you can't talk buffer overflows and cross-site scripting exploits to your senior leadership. How do you build out that translation layer from geek speak to business speak to convey the risk to the operational enterprise, the business units and missions within the organization?
Zulfikar, we got a 30-second question for you here. Talking about television, there's a show called Mr. Robot, and they talk about motivation behind cybersecurity. So when you try to hire people, what kind of motivation do you look for?
I think, again, the key is trying to find people who are trying to do something good in this world and want to leverage their skills in a positive way. To your point, I think it's not about their background. Oftentimes we find that a diverse set of backgrounds is a good thing. We've had one customer that had a truck driver who became one of their top analysts. I think that's the key, is being able to take that talent, being able to cultivate it in the right way, and channel it to providing for the greater good.
I'd like to thank my guests, Ron Karbach, Defense Intelligence Officer for Cyber, Defense Intelligence Agency, Tim Ruland, Chief Information Security Officer, U.S. Census Bureau, Shaun Khalfan, Chief Information Security Officer, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and Zulfikar Ramzan, Chief Technology Officer at RSA. I'm John Gilroy, host of Federal Tech Talk on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search In Focus.